In other global news that we are tracking at this hour, U.S. President Joe Biden has urged Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to abandon the judicial overhaul, which sparked massive demonstrations for more than 2 months in the country. In response, Netanyahu said that Israel's decisions are not based on pressures from abroad.
I don't know they're at an inflection point, but I think it's a difficult spot to be in, and they got to work it out.
And what do you hope the Prime Minister will do on that particular law?
I hope he walks away from it.
Now, after weeks of demonstrations on Monday, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that the judicial reform bills will be paused. But after Biden's statement that Netanyahu should walk away from the bills, the Israeli Prime Minister was quick to respond. Netanyahu, responding to Joe Biden, said that Israel is a sovereign country which makes its decision by the will of its people and not based on pressures from abroad, including from the best of friends. Now, Netanyahu also termed the Israel-US alliance as unbreakable. He said that the alliance always overcomes the occasional disagreements. The judicial overhaul proposed by the Israeli government sparked massive demonstrations across the country. The overhaul would give the Israeli government greater control over appointments to the country's Supreme Court. People have been protesting the overhaul on the streets for over 11 weeks now. Now, for more on this, we're now being joined by correspondent Jody Cohen from Ranana. Hi, Jody. Now, do you think Biden's comments reflect a hardening of the U.S. position against Netanyahu at the moment?
Hi, Rahisha. Yes, so it's interesting that as President Herzog was holding the first direct talks between representatives of the coalition and the opposition seeking a compromise on this judicial reform, on these plans, President Biden was boarding the flight and urged Netanyahu to abandon the judicial reform plans altogether and said that no invitation for a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu had been set in the near term. And that followed Ambassador Naida's remarks suggesting that Netanyahu would be invited relatively soon. President Biden's remarks have differed from the U.S. messaging that we saw on Monday, where U.S. officials repeatedly praised Netanyahu for entering these negotiations. And when President Biden's flights landed, he gave further remarks suggesting that Israel is in a difficult spot, saying they have to work things out. Prime Minister Netanyahu responded at 1 o'clock in the morning local time, suggesting that he makes policy based on Israeli interests and not pressure from abroad, including, quote, from the best of friends, but said the US-Israel alliance is unbreakable and that they always overcome occasional disagreements. So it does suggest that there's a disagreement here, certainly on the policy. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is on the right wing, President Biden is on the left wing. They've known each other for over 40 years, but they certainly do not agree all the time on policies.
Right, Jody. Now, after the bills were paused yesterday, the first direct talks were held between the coalition and the opposition. What kind of progress has been made so far, and where does this leave with the demonstrations and the legislation as of now?
So in terms of the demonstrations, while the talks were going on in the president's residence, both pro and anti-judicial reform rallies were being held outside. The anti-reform protest leaders are now protesting Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. Remember, they're the head of the two largest opposition parties, and they're criticizing them for even participating in these talks, calling it shocking and outrageous, and saying that Netanyahu isn't fit to lead the country. There seems to be concern, it's being reported there's some concern amongst the protest leaders that these talks could be taking the wind out of the protesters' sails, and the protest leaders are confirming that the weekly protests, the big mass rallies we've been seeing at the weekend, they will continue. Now, a statement was released from the president's office saying that the discussions were conducted in a positive atmosphere. The head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, has suggested that he thinks these talks could be an opportunity to make real change, not cosmetic fixes. That's his goal. The talks are continuing today, and also more opposition parties are joining these talks today.
Right. Thank you, Jody, for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.